Hi there, this is Dick Hoffensberger, and I'd like to welcome you to week 6 of our business sustainability course. We're going to be talking about two main topics today. The first deals with the developing or emerging markets, and the second deals with the issue of poverty alleviation. First, to developing and emerging markets. In much of the literature today, they talk an awful lot about these quickly evolving countries, and they talk about the BRIC countries. And this again is the acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These are economies that are experiencing tremendous growth and establishing a new, larger middle class. As companies and look at this, they're looking at this developing emerging countries and how to market to the bottom of the pyramid. And when you talk about a developing country, they do use some metrics, and they talk about you either have low or middle per capita, defining whether it's developing or not. The low range is less than $1,000 per capita per year in income, whereas the middle ranges between $1,000 and $12,000 of gross national income per capita, defining whether it's low or middle. Next, with a higher growth in developing countries rather than developed countries, we see this growth always leading right up to the year 2020. So we're going to see the Chinas and the Indias grow at a much faster rate than, say, the United States. Developing countries also provide good models for economic development, seeing whether they're successes or failures. So they're very interesting to study. And there's also a question whether there's fortune or potential problems for business and marketing firms, whether they market to this bottom of the pyramid. When we do look at developing markets, there's different macro factors that determine their level of development. We're going to look at various items within this. We're going to first look at the area of culture, and a culture can either be progress prone or be somewhat resistant and hang on to the roots and things like that. It's also the topic of a book called the Lexus and the Olive Tree, the world-class Lexus versus the olive tree of the roots of a culture. Secondly, the second macro factor deals with the population, and whether this population is the urbanization aspect or rural areas, what is the health like, and what is the education systems like for the general population. Thirdly, we have geography and climate, which are factors showing for development of markets. Next, we have the economy, whether it's agricultural based, what kinds of industries and services are out there, and the type of capitalism in that developing market. Next, we have the political system, and it deals quite a bit with looking at how stable the political system is for these developing markets. Finally, for the developing markets, a macro factor is the infrastructure, which really is the physical assets or the institutions of society. An example of this would be like the legal system. When we look at developing countries, we really need to recognize that they've made great gains in recent years, the last 50 years. They've really improved their quality of life in many of these countries. Again, they're having their own middle class. They're having jobs, opportunities. We also see the emerging markets as very attractive to multinational corporations. There's a video piece out there called 3 Billion New Capitalists put out, and it's very interesting to see how the areas of Russia, India, and China are creating extreme positive and attractive markets for companies like car companies and areas like that. The problem we have is that in many cases, few firms have figured out how to effectively market to the poorest of the poorest consumers. So it's really debatable whether there's a profit and a diamond there, or whether there's a lot of opportunities and more problems than potential. We then shift to the area of poverty alleviation, which is somewhat related to the topic of emerging nations. But the issue of poverty alleviation, there are different myths that are out there about poverty alleviation. I'd just like to briefly mention those. Many people think you can donate people out of poverty, and this is in reality not the case. Another myth of poverty alleviation is that national economic growth itself will end poverty, which is not true. And finally, there's a myth that big business will actually end poverty, which also is not true. They cannot be the sole answer for anything. Dealing with this poverty alleviation aspect is really different solutions that have been tried, and many with limited success. There have been programs dealing with intervention. There have been programs dealing with poverty alleviation with social services, and finally empowerment of the people to alleviate poverty. There's been a newer issue form called social entrepreneurship, which are really different nonprofit organizations which advance solutions for social problems. They have been proven to have some positive impact. Finally, with poverty alleviation, another term used or program is the idea of fair trade, which enables the poor to function more effective in markets. An example of this would be like in the coffee markets, dealing in a fair trade environment. So these two issues are really critical to the whole area of marketing, and firms need to recognize. So this does conclude our part 6 dealing with these issues. I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope you have a great day, and thank you again for listening. Bye now.